Welcome to AEC Stories. This is former SM-3 Dempsey of the USS Mount Hood. This week, we're going to talk to a guy that actually lived and worked on a submarine, but before that, he was on a landing craft, and his name is Kris Wilson from Cincinnati. I believe he joined around 1993, but we'll get more into that in the podcast. And if you could please leave us a review on iTunes under the AEC Stories podcast, or aecstories.podbean.com is where our main webpage is. Or even say hi to us if you want to just drop in or be a guest on Facebook under AEC Stories Podcast. Thank you and enjoy. So you started with the Gator freighter?
Yes, so I joined in October of '93 and went to Great Lakes boot camp. And it's funny, when I joined, I was 23. I had tried college for a while and realized that I wasn't ready for that. Because I ultimately had wanted to join when I was 18. And everyone said, no, go to college. Don't join when you're 18. Because I really felt patriotic and led to, serve my country. So I didn't join when I was 18. So I ultimately joined when I was 23. And I kind of understood what was going to happen at boot camp. They were going to break you down and make you up to be a new person. And this was when Great Lakes was just all guys still. The females only went to Orlando. They were just closing down San Diego. And going in October, it was starting to get cold. So I finished boot camp, when it was blistering cold in December. And I shipped off to Norfolk. I had orders to the USS Saipan, which was a landing amphibious Harrier carrier, LHA number 2. Had no idea what I was going to do. I came in as an undesignated seaman. I got assigned to the deck department, and fortunately, while shipping paint in the well deck, the Chief Miller, was going through the records. He's like, what is this 23-year-old guy that is, seems to have his wits about him? What is he doing shipping paint? How can we use him to better our advantage? And he came up to me and he said, hey, what do you know about computers? And I said, anything you want to teach me. I'd already understood that when you're asked a question, listen to the question and then think about your answer. And, this was right, like I said, in '93. So Windows was just now kind of coming out. And he said, Seaman Wilson, we've got deck department needs a yeoman, and we need to take all these records and convert them from paper to digital. And we've got all these SAQ reports that need to be tracked for all of our monthly maintenance and things like that. How about you come work in the office? And I thought, hey, if I'm not shipping paint, that sounds good to me. And so I started doing that on the Saipan, and what was good, what kept me connected with all the guys, is I still learned how to learn helmsman and how to do watch, and so I would still rotate. But 9 times out of 10, I'd be in the office working, and so that, I get to know the guys better of the deck department. And of course, they'd always want favors because I would handle all the request chits and things like that. And I was on the Saipan for a little over 18 months. And when I first got there, I realized, gosh, I wish I had asked my recruiter more questions. Of course, you always think that in hindsight. And I felt that I wanted to be in something a little bit more elite. And I thought, well, what's more elite than submarines? And after being on the Saipan for 6 months, I submitted a request to transition to the to submarine fleet. And that got approved, but I had to stay on board the Saipan for 18 months. So fast forward 18 months, and I finally get my transition leave, and I go up to Groton, Connecticut, and take classes there, do my school there. And by then, I was I was striking for yeoman. I took my E4 exam. I'm 20, almost 25 years old by then, and so I got all these other young sailors around me. So, and I've been out to sea, right? So I've been getting, I've got some stories under my belt and able to talk about deployments and things like that. So that was kind of cool to be able to relate to the to the drill instructors that were at sub school and not be just this young guy that's just coming out of boot camp.
Yeah.
And after I got my orders, I actually got married in between leaving the USS Saipan and going to submarine school. Married my wife of now 22 years, and
congrats.
They ask you, thank you. They ask you, where do you want to be stationed? Well, for us, we wanted to stay on the East Coast. Our family was here from Ohio. We wanted to stay on the East Coast, so I picked Kings Bay, Georgia, because that's where the boomers, the ballistic missile submarines, are out of. And then I think I picked Norfolk for a second choice, and then I had to pick two choices on the West Coast, and I picked Bremerton, Washington. Again, that's where boomers are, and then I picked San Diego. And I got the orders that I wanted. I couldn't believe it. I got orders for I think they were for the USS Birmingham, they were for the USS Alabama out of Kings Bay. So we were very excited. And as everybody knows about the military, you can't count on anything until you truly report to duty, and even then it can change.
Yeah.
It was the same day that I had orders in hand for the Alabama. And I don't know if I ticked off the chief that was in the orders office, the yeoman's office there, because I kept checking on my orders or what. But that same day, my orders switched to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on the USS Birmingham. You mean so as far away as you could possibly get at that time, at least for where submarines were stationed.
Wow.
We couldn't believe it. We were really pretty frustrated and upset, actually, because we thought, here we are, I'm going to have to move my newlywed out to Hawaii. We don't know anybody. It's going to be too expensive for anybody to fly out and see us. This is before email and cell phones and calling plans. If you lived in Hawaii, you might as well be in a different country, because 6 hours difference. But it is what it is, so I got my orders, and I called them up and I said, hey, I'm going to be reporting. What should I kind of plan for? Of course, they can't tell you much over the phone. I just remember my chief telling me, make sure that my dress blues are ready. Well, I thought that was pretty interesting, that my dress blues needed to be ready when I was going to Hawaii, because you never wear your dress blues in Hawaii. I did know that. You're always in dress, whites or your ice cream suit. You never wear dress blues. Well, as soon as I get there, 3 weeks later, I find out that we're leaving on a 6-month deployment, within a couple weeks of me reporting.
Wow.
And so that's why I needed my dress blues. So I left my wife in Ohio, and she had a job, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be gone for 6 months on deployment, and we'll communicate through letters the best we can. And this is when, when you're on a submarine, like I said, there wasn't email, you didn't have cell phones, you would get radiograms, and any guy that works in a Radio Shack, would understand what those were. And it was kind of like a text message, on steroids, because they could send us 140 words, and we would get those once a month. And so you get really creative with your loved one would get really creative with their words, because they were trying to tell you, a whole story. But they wouldn't get too personal, right? Because these radiogram, they go in the Radio Shack would download them. Of course, they all took turns reading everybody's messages. And then the XO would get them, and the captain would get them. And then they'd get passed out. They'd end up in the yeoman's shack where I was, and we'd pass them out with mail calls. So, everybody got to read everybody's letters.
Kind of like Twitter.
So I showed up to the Birmingham. Yeah, it's like Twitter, right?
You get to send each other a tweet.
Exactly. But it was one way, right? We couldn't communicate back. The only time we could communicate back was, you pull into port, and we'd send out our mail. So, but being on the Birmingham was interesting, right? So, it was exactly what I expected from sub school. There really wasn't any lies. But what was interesting is as soon as you leave port, your day changes. No longer is it a 24-hour day like it is on the surface fleet. It's an 18-hour day. XO, you've got 6 hours that you're doing your job, whatever your rate is. So I was a yeoman, so I was in the yeoman shack, and whether that was handling personnel records or typing up operational reports or doing correspondence for the captain and the XO. That's that was our daily job, right?
Yep.
So there were 4 of us in the shack, and we'd rotate between that. And then you got another 6 hours where you're doing something to support the ship. Well, as a yeoman, we would drive. So we would either be sitting at the helms planes or the fairwater planes, and we would be driving the ship. And once you had qualified and mastered that, you could get rotated into the sonar shack if they needed extra guys sitting at the stacks watching sonar. So you got 6 hours driving. And then the other 6 hours, you're going to eat, you're going to sleep, and you're going to be doing field day, and you're going to be doing drills. Now, you would hope, if you're lucky, during your 6 hours of driving, that's when field day would happen, right?
Yeah.
So that XO, it didn't matter if your closet was 2 by 2, you were cleaning that closet for 4 hours during field day. Something that you could clean easily in 20 minutes, and you could strip the wax off the floor and reapply new wax, and you'd had it fit and cleaned. You could have it done in 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes if you wanted. You were going to work on that field day for 4 hours, and that's fun. It didn't matter. Hell help you if you fell asleep and the XO caught you, or the cob, chief of the boat, if he caught you. And this is before, you didn't have iPods, right? This is in the 90s. This is 95. So we all had CD players or tape decks on our belts. So you could listen to some music. So you hope that you were driving the helm, so you weren't having to field day every Friday. Every Friday morning is when it was happening. You hope that you'd be at the helm and not having to clean.
What was
invariably, if that happened, say that again.
What was your soundtrack? Do you remember any of your music from back then, deep under the sea?
So I don't listen to a lot of different music. Ace of Base was popular then, so I like the top 40s. But I also liked country, so I had some Hank Williams Jr. that I would rotate through. It was funny. The shack, we were always doing. One of the guys, he was in his 19, I think. He was always making mixtapes of different dance club music, so we'd swap those around. So it was all kinds of different music. It just depended on who you're working with. I always had to clean the 21-man berthing area. So it was me and one other guy. So it was a berthing area with 21 racks. We could easily clean it in an hour. And again, it was 4 hours, and I think I would strip it while he was sweeping, and then we would reverse. Then he would re-strip it while I was sweeping, and then he'd lay a coat of wax, and we'd let it dry while we would polish some brass or chrome or something on the bulkhead. And then I'd go back, and then I'd re-polish, put some more wax down while that was drying. Then we'd do some more polishing of some, brass or whatever that was on the bulkhead. And, then we'd have to take, a good 30 minutes to wash out our little tiny 1-gallon bucket and our little sponges. You milked it for as long as you could, just showing that you were busy. As long as the cob or the XO saw that you were busy and you weren't, dicking around, then they didn't bother you too much. But if you were just sitting there chewing the fat, then you were definitely going to get a chewing out. That's for sure.
That's pretty interesting. What did you? Let me ask you. Like, a submarine is a total different vehicle to me. I mean, I grew up listening to, as a kid, reading Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and they had a window in theirs. You weren't exactly, steering forward at nothing but a steel bulkhead and radars, pretty much, right?
Right. Yeah, no windows on our subs, right? It's all bulkheads. And what's interesting, during those 18-hour days, they would try to follow, a very rigorous schedule. So if it was during, from 0600 to say 2200, lights were on everywhere. Berthing, didn't matter. Lights were on.
Yeah.
And, we had a constant temperature of around 68 degrees, so everybody would be wearing sweaters. And we had poopy suits. They were coveralls, blue coveralls. We called them poopy suits because, we couldn't do laundry, certainly not every day, and sometimes not every week. So sometimes your coveralls would get a bit ripe.
Yeah.
We had fresh water. We could certainly take a shower every day. It'd be a quick shower, right? We didn't we didn't time it. We could turn the waters on and off easily. I've heard some places where the water is really restricted, but you certainly didn't take a Hollywood shower because we only had 3 showers for 123 guys, right? So you knew you get in there, you get that water on, you get soaked up, you turn off that water, and then you rinse off and get out. But we'd wear our poopy suits and our sweaters because it could get cold. It was always 68 degrees. And the inside of our sub, the sub was painted this lime green. It was supposed to be a very cheerful color. It was a lime green.
Psychological.
You could smell.
Yeah.
Yeah, psychological color. And what's interesting, so because I was a yeoman, I worked forward of the reactor. And, of course, if we were out to sea, the watertight doors were closed between the reactor and the forward department. But the forward half of the ship always smelled like the diesel engines. Even though we were a fast attack submarine, we still had the diesels that for backup. And you could just smell that diesel engine, or you could smell the manapine, which was this chemical that was used in the oxygen generators, so they pulled in seawater, ran it through these oxygen generators, and they used this amantapine as a chemical to help separate the oxygen molecule because we made our own, breathable air. Well, you would that chemical would permeate into the pores of your skin, and for days, my wife could smell that on me, and you could smell it on your clothes. It's a very distinctive smell. Any guy that served in the subfleet would absolutely be able to relate and know what that smell is.
You're probably the first man in history who ever brought up this interesting aspect of living on a sub, which is cool. You're a first, I'm sure. I've listened to other sub podcasts, and I've not heard about this yet.
Well, and I guess the other interesting factor was because I was, when I reported to the Birmingham in, I guess it was November of '95 when I actually finally reported. And like I said, we were getting ready to leave for a 6-month deployment. As you know, or as you may know, there's not enough racks for everybody to have their own bunk.
You hot rack.
Well, right, and that's for junior guys. Well, I hadn't yet picked up my crow. I had taken my E4 exam, but I hadn't gotten my crow yet. So I was certainly going to be hot racking with 1 or 2 other E3s, and you hoped you found your bunkmate was at least clean and halfway organized, because you had your own set of sheets, your own blankets, so the only thing you were truly sharing was a mattress. But I remember my first bunk was in the forward part of the submarine. It was a bottom bunk, which you don't want a bottom bunk because everybody steps on it, climbing into their other racks, and they're 3 racks high, just like on the surface ship. So you never want a bottom bunk because it's going to get stepped on. But the other thing, at least for me, was I was right up against the bulkhead of the sonar access point. So you can access the sonar dome, and there was this hatch that any time there was a problem, it was mainly if we were pulling in and out of port, that's where the lines to tie up the submarine would be stored.
Okay.
So you'd lay them in the passageway to let the lines dry, and that would take, a couple, 2-3 days. Us guys would be walking on the lines. But then after they dried, they had to stow them in this forward sonar dome area. Well, that was right where my bunk is. So it was miserable for the first 2 or 3 months of me having to sleep there until I got my crow. Once I got my crow, then I didn't have to hot rack anymore. And of course, the fact that I was working in the yeoman shack, that made it a little bit better. And I think that the Cobb always kind of took care of us and tried to give us the better berthing and try to take care of us in little ways that he could, because, we handled all the pay, all the special request chits, so that was leave, all the mail. We were the ones that got the mail, separated the mail, and got the mail divvied out to everybody. So that usually us guys in the yeoman shack were taken care of. We'd always get, razzed and there were always some unique names that they'd throw at us because the job wasn't so hard. It certainly wasn't like being a machinist mate or being a torpedo man, because we were sitting at desks doing paperwork, but it had its challenges. The challenges would be, for example, when we were deployed, and I remember we pulled into Phuket, Thailand, and we had been out to sea for a good 45 days.
Wow.
So we pull into Phuket. Everybody was ready for leave. We were going to get, I think, 3 or 4 days of R&R.
Wow.
Because it had been in a good 45 days, we knew that there was going to be a ton of mail that needed to be picked up.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't the junior yeoman, but I was certainly not the senior, and 2 of us needed to go pick up the mail in Phuket, and the mail was delivered in Bangkok at the embassy, is where we had to pick up the mail. So myself and the second class petty officer, his name was Belton, Mike Belton. He and I hopped on this bus for like 45 minutes, drove us out to the middle of this airstrip in Phuket. We caught this plane, and then we flew for another hour or 2 into Bangkok, which was insane.
Yeah.
It's just like what the movies show, with just, people running everywhere and animals loose and, no sense of direction because there's so many people. Because this was in the 90s. And we finally made it to the embassy. We had over 600 pounds of mail.
Oh, my God.
That we had to bring back to the ship. It was It was like 12 or 15 bags of mail that we had to get on a truck, get it back to the airport, make sure that it got checked back into the plane, and then flown back to Phuket, and then we had to get it back to the submarine. And the submarine, Phuket, at least at that time, they didn't even have a pier that we could tie off onto. We had to anchor out in the harbor. And so then when we got all the mail up to the dock, we had to get it onto a small boat, and from the small boat onto the submarine. Well, we thought that took all day, right? We left at like 600. We got back at 1,400, 1,500 in the afternoon, and we thought, okay, we'll let who's ever on duty start working through the mail, and then we'll just work through the mail over the next several days. No. The chief of the watch was like, we all want our mail. You yeomen are not going on leave until all this mail is separated. Well, we did some delegation after we bitched and complained and said, well, we're going to need some help getting through, all this tonnage of mail to start separating out. It was insane. But I just remember the yeoman shack, we weren't allowed to go on special liberty until all that mail was separated. It was maddening. But all in all, it was fun. And this is when Phuket was still known for some of its shady and somewhat extracurricular activities before the tsunami hit in, I think that was in 2001, that tsunami came through and, caused so much damage to Phuket. So if any sailors out there have been to Phuket in the 80s or 90s, you know what I'm talking about. It is quite it's quite the interesting location. The stories that you could probably tell your son when he's 21.
Yeah, that's one of those ports. Come on, I was at PI several times. Our ship broke down. We lived there for 3 months, so I'm familiar. But I was going to say,
yeah.
it's like you guys, I'm guessing, and you could tell me if I'm right or wrong, because you were on a ship, surface fleet, and then you went submarine. Was the amount of liberty lesser because of the security nature of the sub than it was on a big ship? When you
sorry. Say that part of the question again.
Did you get less port of calls in a submarine than you did on a surface ship?
Oh, Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Less port of calls, and they were certainly shore patrol was tighter knit group. I mean, we had our fair share of short leave when we were on deployment, but it was less port calls for sure. Yes.
So you might just hustle back to the States for a minute. You take a 10-day leave or something and fly. But I was gonna go ahead. I was gonna say that I learned to hate the mail like you did. I used to like getting it, but my last year in the Navy, after we got back from Desert Storm, I get in a motorcycle wreck, and I get stationed at Oak Knoll Naval Hospital out here in California, which no longer exists. Now it's on Haunted Buildings television show. But it was a great, lively place when I was there. There wasn't any ghosts when I was working there. But we were in the mailroom. I get put there. I was a signalman, so I was used to doing communications and look out and watch, and I'd have a lot of collateral duties, firefighting and helo deck and master at arms, stuff like that. But yeah, they put me in this mailroom, and I thought, cake duty. Boy, did I realize a mailroom at a hospital, which is tons of people, probably more than the 600 pounds. We're talking probably a ton. Bales of mail every day. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And just sorting and it's like, oh my gosh. You get it in the morning and you get to have it ready by noon,
Yeah.
And you couldn't backlog that stuff or cut out early. But it was so out of my rate and so out of my active sea adventure kind of job. I'm like, this sucks. So, for you to get the 600 pounds of mail, yeah, that really resonates with me. Coming into port, that's like, listen, the submarine needs to be painted and we're only going to be here for 2 days.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Kind of rates up there. What were some of your best port of calls with the sub?
I'd say some of the best port of calls was Singapore. We were there for 5 days. That was really interesting. And it was really warm weather, so that made it nice because it was probably it was late February when we got there, but it was still really nice. Yokosuka, Japan was fun because we were in Yokosuka for a month, actually. So no sooner than we leave for deployment, I don't know if there's just the timing of how the deployment was. I think what we were doing is we left early and we were taking over on a spec op, special operations that another crew was coming off of. Okay. So they hadn't come off station, and so we were in Yokosuka for near 3 weeks. It was certainly over Christmas, and being able to go take a train up into Tokyo and see everything, that was really fun because we actually got to see things because we were there for 3 weeks and we were doing things, waiting to get on the operation.
Well, you get the Liberty's so much sweeter after you're put, 20,000 leagues under the sea, as I like to say. I know it may not have been that
right.
many, but still, I mean, you learn to appreciate things when you give up your liberty and stuff, and it's like every time a guy pulls in for liberty, it's like a guy getting out of jail. I mean, it's like ready to rock and roll pretty much. At least it's been my times.
Yeah.
Of course, you guys probably had, the nature of your boat, you had to be even more, there couldn't be too many wild boys in a submarine. They'd be kicked off really quick, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, I mean, we certainly had some shenanigans. I mean, I during deployment, we crossed the equator, so I became a shellback. We crossed the international date line, so I became a golden dragon. We were up near the North Pole, so I got my blue nose. So we certainly got some ceremonial things that we got to do because it was still in the 90s, and there weren't certainly any females on submarines yet. The rituals that you might have heard your uncles or your dads or your grandfathers might have gone through, we certainly had those rituals. So that was a lot of fun, certainly being able to become go from a polywog to a shellback, and having to kiss the baby and go through all that, and those were some good times to remember. But guys, we kept our nose clean pretty much when we were in town, because if you got in trouble with the law, most likely you were going to lose your security clearance.
Yeah.
And of course, if you lost your security clearance, you were going to get pulled off the boat. So it was unfortunate for a few guys that they might have had an issue with a bad divorce or something like that, and they went out and go on a bender, and then they ended up, not only their marriage was in shambles because of something happened there, but now their career is messed up because they went out and got drunk, got a DUI, something like that. So we certainly had to keep our nose clean, and this was still during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and that was one way that you could certainly get kicked off the boat very quickly. Whether you were or not, if you were tired of being in the submarine fleet, you couldn't just transfer out. You either had to smoke pot and pop positive on a piss test, or you'd come out and say that you were gay, and both of those would get you off the boat that same day.
Now that doesn't get you. I don't think, I haven't been in the fleet, but I don't think that gets you anywhere. But congratulations. So,
no longer is it a bad chicken dinner, but
grab
it was
that
a bad chicken dinner back then.
Grab that swab and go handle that bulkhead over there. And there's some dust bunnies.
Yes, exactly.
Like, good for you.
Day for you.
Good for you. I need you to take this paint down to the paint locker.
Exactly.
And I can see how we've arrived at that. Everything's changed, and I'm not Mr. Political, or people are people. I don't really have an agenda, and I don't try to bully people, and I don't care. I just want an effective Navy. I just want an effective Navy. That's all I care about.
Right.
Recently
we wanted to know who we served with would have our back, and that we were safe.
Pretty much, and that all comes down to character. No matter what your sexual preference is, it's about character and doing your job. There's a guy that could be like, I'm on this team, like, yeah, but you suck at doing your job, so you really don't have my back.
Yeah.
But what was your transition out of the Navy like? You did how many years again, total?
So, just shy of 5 years. So the USS Birmingham decommissioned really early in its career. It barely had 19 years of active service. And this was during Clinton's Navy, so things were getting drawn back. So the Birmingham decommissioned in December of '97, but then it took us a year to, truly be able to say the boat was in a state that could go to the shipyard. And being in the yeoman shack, we would always be the last ones that would leave. We had to get everybody else transferred to new duty stations. And so I got out of the military in January of '98 and moved back to Cincinnati, Ohio, and took some classes in computers and learned how to be a network engineer, and started working for different places here in Cincinnati. And I've been in Cincinnati ever since. So, gosh, I've been out of the military now 21. It'll be 20 years this January will be the anniversary, and have been in the IT computer field since I got out. And the one thing that I'm most frustrated about, and I would tell this to anybody that's either still active or that is thinking about it, get as much school done as you can when you're active duty. And if you can't finish your degree before you get out, no matter what, use your GI Bill when you get out and finish your degree. Again, when I got out in '98, the GI Bill had a lot of restrictions, and you couldn't. They didn't have online schools or things like that. You had to sit in a brick and mortar building, and I needed to have a job, and I had a family that I had started, so I couldn't go to school for another 2-3 years and just focus on school. So I've been whittling away at my degree ever since, and working on it here and there, a different semester at a time. But that would be my one of my two suggestions for anybody that's still in the military, is get your schooling done. And I think the programs are a lot better for them now, and they can accelerate getting their degree faster while they're still active duty. The other suggestion I would have, this would be for any new listener, on the podcast that may be thinking about getting in the military is know what you want to do and ask questions. And I would even recommend going to more than one recruiter and ask questions.
Yeah.
Because the first thing that he tells you may not be the whole truth, and you might have different options. And I know for me, I was lucky. When I did join was in October, and that was right when they get their budget. So I had some different options that maybe if you were, say, to join in the spring or in the summer, they don't have their budget. You know, they've spent their budget for the year, so you may not have as many opportunities for classes. But that's what I would say in closing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if you have any injuries and you're getting your VA benefits, I think you can also, I'm going to do one on all the VA benefits. But, the VA home loan is awesome, too, if you haven't used that.
Yeah.
They have a...
Good. I do use that. I'm in my second home, and I definitely, the VA loans have been very helpful. That's the biggest benefit that I've used more than once since I've been out, definitely.
Yeah, I just referred a friend of mine, and I'll help any other shipmates that hit me up for this, but I referred a former shipmate to my friend. I was a loan officer for a decade, so I know my loans very well. And the VA came out with a new loan for all you listeners that basically it's 100% cash out refi. So you get to refinance your house at the same rate as your first interest. So instead of like a 10% second loan, you now have like a 4.2% first loan, and it's good to consolidate debt and wipe out any crap you got there. And the VA, they want you to have a better quality of life, so they'll do anything to kind of make your life better if your house has gone up in equity. So that was something pretty cool I just saw recently. And this is a new thing, like no other lender does this. No other, like Bank of America, Bank of the West, whatever, has this kind of loan. This is strictly for the VA. So they figure if you're a veteran or, and you get honorable discharge and you can get this loan, basically, let's say that your house is worth $200 and you owe $150, but you get $30,000 in nasty car and credit debt you've been trying to help your kid through school. You can refinance it. We can refinance it up to $200,000, or just go up to $180 and keep close to the same lower interest rate that you have now. And it's just whammy like that. The VA does that for you, and so now your debt's consolidated because you have that equity there. You didn't know about that one, huh? That's a new one.
Well.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know about that one. That's good to know. We'll have to talk offline about that and get more detail.
Oh, for sure. And I was going to say, like, you went into computers. I think, as a piece of advice I'd give anybody getting in the military, look into a career that if you're not planning on doing 20 years, which is kind of hard to do these days anyways, look into a career where you're going to have abilities to use in your civilian world. When you get out of the military, what you do transfers. Like, if your job is working on specialized missiles, it's not going to have much of a conversion unless you go work at Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, or something.
Right.
For me, my job had nothing to do with the civilian world. I'm like, hello, what do we do here? And I don't know if you ran into that, or you were working with computers, so was it easy for you to find a job because of that?
It maybe a little bit, but I was also working in the yeoman shack because there was only 4 of us managing the whole command. There was an aspect of project management, and that's really what I do now. I work in the IT field, but as a project manager. So, the skills I use today are skills that I've drawn on, that I learned in the military, just being organized and, following a plan, following a schedule, following a budget, and being able to be, stand up and be accountable for what my decision is and why I made the decision to do something. All of those traits that I have today are traits that were built on in the military. These are things that I think most everybody, you have to learn it at home or through Boy Scouts or through, church or something like that. But these are things that were instilled in me. They were honed and sharpened in the military because I had some good leaders that directed me in the right way. And then I've just been able to leverage those the last 20 years being a civilian.
You said the
Not that I didn't have fun in the military. I certainly had my time of fun in different ways, and got some good sea stories to tell people over a beer or something like that. But it's been great sharing, so I appreciate it.
That's no problem. It's interesting that you mentioned Boy Scouts. I'm going to cap it off with this, and then I'll talk to you offline. But the Boy Scouts, I was in the Boy Scouts. You're in the Boy Scouts. They say it's one of the, it's the foundation of the highest percentage of people that do well in life are usually Boy Scouts, and it's just a good foundation to learn when you're young. And it's just a coincidence. It's interesting that you brought that up. But
yeah.
This is cool to share with you, and I hope everybody tunes in and checks us out on Facebook and AEC Stories on Podbean and iTunes, as well as Stitcher, and we're even on Spotify. So on any one of those things, if you leave your comments, it helps us get more listens and helps us reach more veterans that really love this kind of stuff.